So there was talk before about how things were in the so-called FGC Dark Ages. Really, at the crux of it, there weren't any new Capcom games released. Fighting games were still coming out, people were still coming to locals, but things weren't growing, and it was looking kind of concerning for the community at large. The same people kept showing up to the same events again and again and again, which is nice because, like, you know, our community is getting more tight-knit in that regard, but that lack of growth and the lack of fresh faces was like a little concerning for the community at large, because it's like, okay, well, we're still together and we're still like keeping things all like set and tied together, but what happens whenever we're not here? And initially I wanted to do a discussion on this, but I didn't do it for the reasons that I will discuss later on. So I ended up not doing it. Because I didn't feel like I was in a good enough position to do it. I could do the research. In fact, I did do some research, but I didn't feel like this was a topic I should cover. So in my stead, another one of my local friends in the fighting game community, a player by the name of Ultimate Vitality, be sure to subscribe to him on the YouTubes. I will include his YouTube channel in the description. He made a video discussing the FGC Dark Ages, and I just wanted to go through and have a real quick look at it again, because it's been a while since he released this, and I just wanted to refresh myself on the concepts that are mentioned here.
With the constant decline of arcades and exponential rise of consoles, fighting games seem to be a dying genre. A genre that redefined and inspired others was fading into obscurity. In 2001, Capcom vs. SNK 2 was released and is the final good fighting game to be released by Capcom. Later that year, SNK had filed for bankruptcy and had to close its doors. In 2004, although a re-release, Capcom released Hyper Street Fighter 2 Worldwide, and later that year, Capcom Fighting Evolution. The latter is one of, if not the worst, Capcom fighting games to date, and thus began the Dark Ages of fighting games.
Wait a second.
This isn't the full story though. In my honest opinion, this age of fighting games produced some of the most experimental fighting games and even greater fighting game moments. So, join me as I take a dive and see what made this point in time so great when there was supposedly no future.
The important thing I do want to mention here is that during this era, I wasn't even anywhere close to even playing fighting games at the time. Like 2001 to 2004, I was anywhere between the ages of like 2001 to 2004. I was anywhere between the ages of like 1 and 5. So I was not playing fighting games during this time. Barely gaming towards like the end of like the quote unquote dark ages, but definitely not playing fighting games during this time. And knowing what I know now about the scene, I definitely would have missed a lot of things discussing the 3D Mortal Kombats. I would have definitely missed discussing Multi-Blood. I would have missed discussing Dead or Alive. I would have missed discussing the Guilty Gear games, and I wouldn't even know like some of the more like competitive complexities of like the early Tekkens, or what was going on online for DOA 4 and like the early Xbox Street Fighters. Those are all things that I probably would have missed through no fault of my own, just because I wouldn't know directly to research those things. If I were to look up every single fighting game that came out during the FGC Dark Ages, I would be able to give you guys like a list and maybe and I would be able to tell you guys, okay, this game came out when, and such and such and such, and then SNK shut down, that sort of stuff. But I wouldn't be able to tell you like the inner complexities of the games. I wouldn't be able to tell you too much about how innovative some of them were. I wouldn't be able to tell you about how the competitive meta changed, what it was like to be a player at the local scene during this time. I wouldn't know those things because I wouldn't have those firsthand accounts. And that's part of the reason why I didn't want to cover this myself. I feel like someone like Vitality, who is much more well-versed in some of those older titles, is someone who definitely should have discussed this whole era of fighting game history.
Evo 2003. Flo sends the invincible Dan the Nightmare to losers.
This is another moment I would not have missed. I would not have thought to look up anything regarding Soul Calibur during this time.
Evo 2005. Daigo making the craziest comeback against Afro Legends.
Yep. Yep, another moment. The FGC GOAT, even still, I would still probably miss this.
And
Like a newcomer to the FGC, like me who came in towards like the end of Ultra, if I were to look up any moment of Daigo's around this time, the only one I am likely to know about would have been moment 37. I would not have even considered that last clip, that last moment. I wasn't around. I didn't know to look there. Technically, yes, I could have come across it in my research. But how likely would I consider that to be of importance, even though it actually is like significantly important to what was going on during this era? I definitely would have missed that. And if I didn't already give it a like, I would give it a like again. How do I give this video another like? What Vitality mentions at the end of this video is extremely true. Even though he wasn't around competitively in the scene until 2009, these were the games that he played during the Dark Ages. These are the games that he's familiar with. These are the games that he knows. He just knows that era of fighting games. Even if he wasn't like involved with like the greater fighting game community at large, he's at the very least aware of what was going on in terms of like the games that were being released and all like the stuff that had to do with them. If I had to say one thing about a lot of people, not just FGC creators, but also really just people in the social media space in general, is that they don't know often enough when to talk about things that are in their league, and more often than not, they will talk about things that they are not fully educated on. I could have done a video on the FGC Dark Ages. It would have probably discussed a lot of things factually, but it would have definitely missed out on some of the finer things that you can't always catch during your research. The things that you won't necessarily be aware of unless you live through those moments. And that's why I think it's important for people who have gone through different points of time. I think it's important for them to share their stories, to share their perspectives. Because yes, we could have like factual accounts of everything, but in writing down everything, there's always going to be stuff that people miss. And I think the real benefit of having people who have experienced those moments directly is that they get to fill in those gaps. So if you are a fighting game creator, if you're any creator in any space, or really just anyone that's looking at anything online and thinking, oh, I could totally just talk about this, I could do this better, that sort of thing, I want you to really think closely about if you actually could do that. Do you have the experience to do so? Have you done the research for it? Are there things that you missed? Because I guarantee you that there are going to be things that you're going to miss. No one's perfect. But some people are just better for the job. Thanks for watching.